are called candles are white, and on the slash pine they're brown. And that's one way to tell. Another way to tell is that the needles are all 3 to a fascicle on the longleaf pine. There's always 3 needles. I say always. That's from somebody who called me a liar and find one on a tree with 2 or 4. But they'll have 3 needles to a fascicle. And the slash pine has 2 and 3 to a fascicle on the same tree. The needles tend to be a little bit longer. These would be quite long for slash pine, but it's hard to tell because there's a lot of overlap. And the other way you can tell is by the size of the cones. The cones are much larger on the longleaf pine. You see those cones up there. On the slash pine, they average about half that length. And we see some. But they have an interesting, they've adapted to fire. Much different than the trees up north. The seeds germinate in the ground, and the roots will grow, and they'll send up a bunch of needles. It looks just like a clump of grass. We probably pass dozens of them and think it's just a clump of grass. And it can stay that way. What? Can stay that way. It can stay that way for up to 15 years with just that clump of grass while the root system grows. And then when the tree grows, it shoots up really quickly. And this is kind of unusual to have a branch that low, because they usually have just a single stem and they grow quickly to get above the fires. And the other way they protect themselves against fire is that as you look at all of the trees, you'll see that the needles clump around the growing tips. And these needles are just full of water, so that as the fires go through, that water turns to steam, which is the temperature of boiling water, and that growing tip can withstand that kind of temperature, so it protects the growing tip. Lots of times when you'll have trees maybe this high, and there'll just be a few green needles at the tips of the branches, and then it'll just continue on growing. Everything else will be burned off. Both slash pine and longleaf pine do it the same way.
Amazing adaptations. It's just mind-boggling how they adapt to do that.
These white flowers over here, I've also never seen as many of them as I've seen on our trails this year. Those are bog buttons. Don't necessarily grow in bogs. They grow in wet areas, they grow in dry areas, they grow all over the place. They can grow up to 18 inches in height. Occasionally you may see some that look like that are about 3 feet in height, and those are called pipewort.
So how are these different from hat pins?
They're not.
They're the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually think about the hat pins.
That's one thing when you use common names, and I use common names when I take people out on hikes, is that nobody remembers. Most people don't want to remember scientific names, and so we use common names. But a lot of plants have more than one common name, and the names are not always descriptive, like broom sedge. It's not a sedge, it's a grass.